Welcome to JustWannaQuilt, a research podcast coming out of Tulane University Law School, where we explore all kinds of things, stories about quilting, tools, field trips, maybe some famous quilters stop by, and, of course, a little bit of copyright thrown in just for fun. I'm Elizabeth Townsend-Guard, your host. I'm a law professor at Tulane University Law School. I also hold 2 fellowships right now, one at the Business School and one at the Newcomb Institute at Tulane, and I just want to quilt. So Michael Hecht of GNO Inc., which is a nonprofit here helping businesses pivot, have opportunities. It's like a thing here in New Orleans. He joins us. He has been really keeping all the information flowing here with a daily newsletter that goes out, and we chat with him. We're very, very excited that he makes time for us, and here we are.
Hey, Elizabeth, I'm sorry. I'm just getting off the radio with Newell.
I understand. You're a busy person.
A lot of heat. I don't know how much light, but a lot of heat.
There's a lot going on.
How you doing?
I'm good. I'm talking with John Christie at 12, so I'm just going to see if we can push it to 12:15. Okay.
Oh, good. Okay. Tell John I say hello.
I will. Well, thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. We'll make this quick because I know you're super busy. But we've been doing a series of conversations with people much broader than it's a podcast called Just Wanna Quilt. But, quilters, and so it became mask makers, and then we became involved in really understanding the whole world. So your piece, the GNO piece, is really helpful, and we're close to completing this part of the project. So thank you again for chatting. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. No, of course. Happy to.
Awesome. Well, we're going to ask the first question super easy, but for preservation purposes, tell me your name and where you're calling from.
Great. And should I pick up the phone, or to get better sound quality for you, or
we're good? We're totally good. Yeah,
good? Okay.
We're fine. Yeah.
So Michael Hecht, Hecht, and President and CEO of Greater New Orleans Inc.
Awesome. And we ask everybody this question: do you have a first memory of someone sewing or quilting, and if so, what would that be?
Yeah, my first memory of somebody sewing was a piece of tapestry, or a sewn picture that was done for me when I was born, which we still have hanging in our house. That was 2 alligators, two purple alligators on an orange background, called Click and Clack, and it was done by my great aunt. And that was and I've always loved that picture, and so it's now hanging in my kids' rooms.
Yeah, it's very, very sweet. Okay, so we've been asking people, what was your life like, and what is GNO for those that don't know? Before, say, like in November or December, like before, like the world changed. What was your life like, and what were you doing?
So GNO Inc. is the economic development nonprofit for the region. And we focus on trying to make New Orleans the best place to have a business and to raise a family in the country. And before Corona, we were working on publishing our 10-year strategic plan, GNO Future. And that plan is still, I think, relevant today, but there's just been a bit of a detour in getting back to it, and now we're just trying to enhance it in context of this post-corona environment, or post-corona world, really.
Very interesting. And I've been really impressed with GNO throughout this crisis. You send out, I think it's daily email, of keeping the world and the community sort of aware of resources, what's happening. Sort of you become kind of a real anchor to this, at least for the New Orleans community and greater New Orleans area. Tell me a little bit more about that and where you see yourself within all of this.
So I've been through a number of disasters now. Katrina, of course, and then 9/11 back when I was in New York. And one of the things that you learn through this is that what people want, first and foremost, is concise, timely, actionable information. not only because it's practically important, but because psychologically it gives people a sense of grounding. And so one of the first things that we moved to do with this was to begin to send out these short missives every day to give people that type of information. And it's interesting, as simple as it is, and as basic of a service as it is the thing that we've done that I get the most positive feedback on, just because it makes people feel a little bit more informed, a little bit more in control, and a little bit more effective in this totally uncertain environment. So
yeah, I look forward to it. I think they come late at night, and I always feel like it really is grounding to sort of know what's happening and what the resources are, and it's a really nice, and as you said, concise but super helpful. It's been really an impressive.
Good, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
It's just me sitting in bed, just hit and send, and so it's
well, I'll think about that now because it's funny because I'm always like at the end of my day, and then it comes in, I'm like, oh, good. Well, it feels like the world is still, being held together somehow, like
That's a lot of responsibility, but no, totally. And every now and then I'll miss it at night. I have to do it early in the morning, but generally I try to get it done before the head hits the pillow.
Yeah, that's great. It's really great. Okay, so a couple of things. Industry pivots. We've seen some remarkable industry in New Orleans pivoting to. Do you want to highlight some of those of like what you're most proud of here?
Yeah, we have a website called GNO Pivot, and we've set up the GNO Pivot Marketplace, and it's kind of like a free eBay for companies that are pivoting their product or service to do two things. One, to serve a need in the community because of Corona, and two, to help generate new revenue streams for them, given that their regular business might be down. So we have distilleries that are now making hand sanitizer. We have clothing manufacturers that are now making masks. We have 3D manufacturing centers like Scale Workplace that are now doing PPE like face shields. And what I love about this is that it's part of a tradition here in New Orleans that I think goes back to World War II and Andrew Higgins when he pivoted from making boats for the swamp, the pirogues, to making landing craft for the Navy for Normandy. And in the process of doing that, not only saved the free world, but grew Higgins Industries from being a 75-person shop to over 20,000 people.
Wow. And
the first fully integrated workshop in New Orleans.
Amazing. Really amazing. And is that part of why we have the World War II Museum here?
And that's precisely why we have the World War II Museum here, actually, is because of Higgins Industry and Andrew Higgins. That was actually the seminal cause for this. So most people don't know that. It was actually, interestingly, located down at Michoud, which is now where we're building the mission to Mars. So the tradition of really sophisticated manufacturing, continues here in New Orleans.
So the other question I had to ask you is sort of how do you feel about sort of the community, like all of us sewists that started to sew and make and volunteer masks, sort of how does that fit into the economy and sort of your thoughts about all of that? Because it was this huge flurry of activity, and I'm curious what your thoughts were about that.
Well, when we think about GNO Pivot, probably the place where the two categories where we've seen the most action has been in hand sanitizer and in masks and gowns. And there's no doubt that the knitting and sewing community really stepped up. And when masks were really scarce, we were finding that it was everything from individuals doing them for friends to local companies like Nola Couture to even then, of course, it became larger companies like American Apparel, now called Los Angeles Apparel, that was doing the sewing and making that happening. And what I loved about that is that it displayed two things about sewing and tapestry work, which is that it's inherently both practical and creative. And masks kind of epitomize that in a neat little way because obviously they're serving a practical health purpose, but now you see a variety of masks around that reflect real creativity and in the very occasional happenstance, even beauty these days.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, and it's that's interesting. Can you tell me a little bit about SODAT? Do you know much about it? We signed up there, but we don't know much about SODAT.
I know of SODAT. I don't know. And there is somebody else on staff, Grady, who would know much more about SODAT. So I can connect you all if you'd like that.
That sounds great. That sounds so great. So okay.
I will do that.
So let's pivot ourselves a little bit to. So we were all indoors, we were all staying indoors, and now we're all out in the streets. And I'm curious what your thoughts are about that, and sort of how do we support or help in this sort of effort to make our world a bit better, I guess. So.
And so are you talking specifically about from the sewing and mask standpoint, or generally from the protest?
Probably generally. Standpoint? I mean, we're watching I'm curious sort of at this point now we've sort of have to include sort of the Black Lives Matter and the protesters, and we're watching them. I'm still self-isolating, so I haven't been out for a really long time. So I'm curious sort of what role does GNO play in sort of social unrest and protest, and how does that sort of shift what you're doing as a nonprofit?
So I think one is that I'm very proud of New Orleans and how we're coming through this moment, and you're seeing these really diverse protests, and I think it represents an awakening, particularly of the younger generation that is now really getting out physically and beginning to express their desire for change. And I think that that's a very positive trend for New Orleans and for the country. Here at GNO Inc., we actually, about a year ago, changed our mission statement to say that the mission of GNO Inc. is to create a thriving economy and an excellent quality of life for everyone. So we were talking about inclusivity really before all of this happened. What we're doing now today is that we're actually going to be putting out a press release today on a partnership we have with the HBCUs in town, Xavier, Dillard, SUNO, around supporting Black entrepreneurship. We are working with an organization called Nolivate Black that has an event called Black Tech NOLA that's specifically about the intersection of African-American companies and technology. And actually, New Orleans is number 5 in the country for African-Americans in tech jobs. So we're already inclusive, and number 3 for women in tech jobs per capita in the country. So supporting that type of inclusive innovation. And then we're working with our partners over at the Urban League of Louisiana on some corporate training programs so that we can help companies understand how they include diversity and equity as just part of their regular operating protocols, so that it becomes not something extraordinary that you do in a time of unrest, but becomes something that is just inherent to the way you operate. And very basic things like how do you ensure that you've got a workforce that is maximizing the talent and reflective of the community. And so that's another program that we're doing. And then just generally, one of our initiatives is around economic mobility and trying to remove barriers that would keep people from generating personal and intergenerational wealth, whether those are educational barriers or health barriers or transportation barriers. And this is all really based on the work that Raj Chetty did over at Harvard, looking at declining economic mobility. So we have a number of initiatives, some of which were actually already going before this moment that we're now doubling down on.
It's very cool. It's really amazing. Well, I've been a big fan of GNO Inc. for a long time, and it's been really remarkable to watch you during this crisis really step up and be in that leadership role. I think it's been really awesome to watch. So that's part of why I wanted to have you as part of our historical record, because it's been really important to see all of it.
That's really touching, and I feel incredibly fortunate to be able to be doing this job in this place at this time. It's as you appreciate, being able to have something that you do that is imbued with meaning is just incredibly intrinsically motivating and fun. And so I'm just feel lucky as heck to be doing it,
Well, it's been amazing to watch New Orleans. We got hit so hard early, and we understand catastrophe, as you said, and we're a community that has a lot of, just every step of the way I've been really proud of sort of how New Orleans has handled this. I imagine you feel the same way.
I do. I think that the mayor has done an excellent job. I think that the police chief has done an excellent job. I think that the community has come together really nicely. And yeah, we just are, I think that we're just good at this. We've got a combination of a real love of place along with a physical muscle memory on how to respond to these types of disasters.
Right.
And that local affinity combined with experience means that we're not perfect, but we're probably, better than the average bear at dealing with these challenges.
I think the things that I kept thinking about was, one, we're used to having to take direction in a catastrophe, and with Katrina, people really understand what happens if you don't. And so when people say stay home, they understand it really is like everybody has to work as a community, which I think is different than other places. And then I also think about the police who are with us at parades and other things, and that we're kind of different on that level than a lot of other communities,
I think so. I mean, you've lived a bunch of other places, so have I. And I do think that this place is fundamentally different. And of course, when you look at the history and the geography of New Orleans, it is actually fundamentally different. I mean, there are a lot of good historical and cultural reasons, going back to the Haitian slave revolts of the late, 1700s that mean that New Orleans is not like the rest of the country and is arguably the northernmost city in the Caribbean rather than one of the southernmost in the United States.
Right. People say that. So how is your family? How is your life? Are you still social distancing? Did you ever have an opportunity to do that? Sort of how has it been to be in the sort of the center of all of this over the last few months?
It has been, not all bad. I think that a lot of people have recognized that, have kind of gotten back to what's important for them. We've certainly spent more time together as a family. Done things like built a model with my 14-year-old that never would have happened before otherwise. I've been taking some music lessons personally. Nice. And so I think that that the flip side of the challenges and the loss is that there's been a slowing down and a simplification that I think everybody has, or most people have enjoyed and benefited from to some degree, and appreciated. And now that we're kind of coming out of this, the things that I'm doing personally are really just kind of common sense things: hand washing, hand sanitizer, trying to avoid crowded, dense indoor spaces. But we're trying to strike a middle ground, and I think that given that the science on this seems to change every day because they're really pushing it forward and learning about it in real time, that people just need to do what is comfortable to themselves and make common sense decisions. And it feels like most people are doing that, frankly, from what I can see.
I think the last question I have is sort of, so what we saw with the masks is first we started making masks super early, and then people like don't make them. Then people were making them. Now sort of the politicalization of masks has been really weird and strange, right? So whether you're wearing a mask is a political choice. And I'm curious with GNO how you stay there's been a lot of weirdness, is all I'm saying. And I'm curious, as a nonprofit, how do you stay in a space that doesn't get wrapped up in all that weirdness,
So, one of the things that I'm very proud of with this organization, and that is also one of our challenges, is trying to stay above that fray.
Yeah.
And we do it, I think, in a couple of ways. Not always successfully, but, generally we're able to pull it off. One is to try to stay as grounded in facts as possible, and by facts I mean real facts. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, most people agree that the CDC, probably more so than the World Health Organization, that the CDC is reasonably credible through this crisis. And so we've been hewing to the CDC guidelines, and they're kind of taken as a reasonable set of facts upon which to build. So that's one, is just to try to be as grounded and fact-based as possible. The second is that we are always looking for the way to describe or approach a situation that's going to be accepted by as broad a swath as people as possible. and sometimes that means nuancing things. So, for example, when we approach criminal justice reform, some people approach it as a purely moral issue. Other people approach it as a purely financial issue, and for most people, it's a mixture. And so we're able to nuance our message and recognize at the end of the day, if you've got the Southern Poverty Law Center and the Koch brothers, Americans for Prosperity, together in the same room agreeing on something, that you really have a chance to make change.
Yeah.
And so we just try to be maybe empathetic is a nice way to say it. And put ourselves in other people's shoes to try to bring them along.
Yeah.
And we're, not always, but most of the time able to do that.
Yeah. Well, it's really amazing to watch. As I said, I'm a big fan of your organization, and what you've done over the COVID crisis has just been remarkable and lovely. So.
Well, I really appreciate that very, very much. And one of the exciting things that happened during quarantine is that my wife got accepted to her PhD program at Tulane.
Oh,
and
nice.
so
That's
she's
great.
Yeah, so she's super, and I'm thrilled because I grew up. My grandparents' house used to be on Audubon Boulevard behind the old Tulane Stadium. So Tulane has always been the archetype of a college, of a university to me, and so I'm thrilled that we're getting back to Green Wave, and I'm very excited about what's going on at Tulane right now. I think that the downtown expansion is so much more significant than most people recognize. It's going to change. It's going to change the future of New Orleans, like ASU going downtown changed the future of Phoenix.
It's really
or Penn going into Philadelphia. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
And glad that she's going to be part of it.
Yeah, totally. Well, that's awesome. Well, send her our congratulations. I think that's really exciting and cool. Well, thank you again for all your time. I know you're super busy, and this means a lot, and you're an important part of the piece. And this will get posted this week or next, and then also it will be part of the archive. We're making a digital archive at Newcomb for the work that we've been doing, so it'll be part of the record.
Please keep me in the loop, and we'd love to come and visit it and support it and promote, and I appreciate that you're doing this.
Awesome. So hold on just a sec. Let me turn off the recording. So you've been listening to Just Wanna Quilt, a research podcast coming out of Tulane University Law School, and I'm Elizabeth Townsend Gard. If you like this podcast, keep listening. Also, we have a Facebook group. Come join us. We talk about a lot of things. We also have an Instagram account. And of course, most importantly, I really hope you get a chance to quilt today.